Anaya, the beautiful Indian bride, and Daniel, her wealthy Australian groom, were supposed to begin a life filled with love and promise. But when Richard, Daniel's own father, stepped into the picture with a secret affair that spiraled out of control, their fairy-tale wedding night ended in blood. What unfolded behind the closed doors of a luxury resort would shock the world: a forbidden passion, a double murder, and a betrayal no one could have imagined. The story began like a dream that most families only imagine. Anaya, a young woman from Delhi, had grown up in a traditional household where honor and reputation mattered above everything else. She was admired not only for her striking beauty, but also for her intelligence and calm nature. Everyone around her believed she would marry a man chosen carefully by her parents, someone who could provide her a secure and respectable life. Fate, however, had something very different planned for her. Daniel entered her world in the most unexpected way. An Australian businessman, tall and confident, he was in India on a work assignment. Their paths crossed at a corporate event where Anaya had accompanied her cousin. What began as polite introductions quickly turned into longer conversations, and soon there was a spark that neither of them could deny. Despite their very different worlds, they discovered common ground in small details, shared humor, love for travel, and long discussions about books and culture. For Anaya, it felt like something out of the stories she had read, and for Daniel, it was a chance at something pure and fresh in his otherwise busy life. Their relationship moved fast. Within months, Daniel was visiting Delhi more often, not for work but to spend time with Anaya and her family. He charmed her parents with his respectful nature, and his financial success only added to their approval. The announcement of their engagement brought joy to both families. Preparations began for a grand wedding in Goa, a destination chosen for its beauty and privacy. As the big day approached, the excitement grew. Relatives traveled from different cities and countries, filling the resort with laughter and noise. The couple posed for pictures against sunsets and decorated halls. Anaya's bridal attire was chosen with care, sparkling jewels and silks prepared for the moment she would walk down the aisle. Daniel, proud and eager, wanted everything perfect for his bride. To the world, they seemed like the perfect match: young, beautiful, successful, and in love. The celebrations were like a dream, complete with music, dancing, and endless feasts. Guests whispered about how lucky Anaya was to find such a match, and how fortunate Daniel was to marry a woman like her. No one could sense the storm building in silence, hidden beneath the layers of tradition and festivity. The wedding was meant to mark the beginning of a lifelong bond, but it was unknowingly setting the stage for a tragedy that would stain both families forever. It was during the months leading up to the wedding that the first cracks in the perfect picture began to form. Anaya, caught between the pressures of preparing for a grand celebration and the overwhelming changes in her life, often found herself in the company of Daniel's father, Richard. He had flown in early to help with arrangements, and his presence was hard to ignore. Richard was not like other men of his age. He carried himself with confidence, spoke with charm, and had the kind of authority that drew people in. Where Daniel seemed youthful and sometimes distracted, Richard appeared steady, experienced, and commanding. At first, their interactions were innocent. Anaya spoke to him about the stress of wedding planning, and Richard listened in a way that felt different from anyone else. He praised her grace, her strength, and her beauty with words that felt too personal to be fatherly. She laughed it off in the beginning, dismissing it as harmless flattery. But soon, those moments of conversation turned into lingering glances, quiet meetings away from the noise, and secrets exchanged in hushed tones. The excitement of secrecy gave Anaya a thrill she did not expect. She knew it was dangerous, knew it was wrong, but the pull was strong. Richard, on the other hand, had fallen much deeper. For him, this was not a fleeting attraction. He began to imagine a life where Anaya was not his son's bride, but his own companion. Every smile from her convinced him that she felt the same. What began as a dangerous flirtation grew into a full affair, hidden from both families and carefully masked behind the laughter and chaos of wedding preparations. Anaya told herself she could manage it, that once she married Daniel, it would all end quietly, but Richard was not willing to let go. His desire for her grew darker, more obsessive. He started finding excuses to be near her, slipping notes into her hand and watching her every move during family gatherings. Anaya began to feel trapped between the life everyone expected of her and the secret she was desperately trying to bury. As the wedding day approached, the tension grew unbearable. Richard was no longer satisfied with stolen moments. He wanted her fully, completely, even if it meant destroying everything in his path. What had started as a secret affair was now a dangerous fire, and no one could see how close it was to burning out of control. The wedding day arrived with all the grandeur expected of a union between two families from different worlds. The resort glowed with lights, flowers draped across every balcony, and the sound of drums echoed through the halls. Guests celebrated with endless music and laughter, capturing photos of the smiling couple, believing they were witnessing the start of a perfect life together. Anaya, dressed in a dazzling bridal outfit, walked through the crowd with a practiced smile, her every step watched with admiration. Daniel looked at her with pride, his happiness radiating as he introduced his new wife to relatives and friends. To everyone around them, the day was flawless, an unforgettable memory being created. But behind the glittering celebrations, shadows were already beginning to stir. Anaya's mind was restless, haunted by the secret she carried. Every time Richard's eyes found hers across the room, a chill ran down her spine. The bond they had built in secrecy now felt like a heavy chain she could not break. She avoided him as much as possible, clinging to Daniel and the rituals of the night, but she knew it was only a matter of time before Richard would seek her out. As the festivities wound down, guests slowly retired to their suites, still humming songs from the dance floor. The night air grew quieter, the noise of celebration replaced by the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The bride and groom were led to a private suite, decorated with candles, silk sheets, and petals scattered across the bed. It was meant to be a place of love and joy, where the couple would begin their new journey together. Daniel, still glowing from the day, saw it as the start of forever. Richard, however, saw it differently. Alone in his room, he could not accept that the woman he desired so deeply was now sharing her first night with his son. His thoughts grew darker with every passing minute, convincing himself that Anaya was his and his alone. He left his room quietly, determined to see her one last time, convinced that fate had tied them together in a way no marriage could undo. As Richard moved through the silent corridors of the resort, Anaya felt an unease she could not explain. The weight of her secret hung heavily in the air, and though Daniel was by her side, she could sense that the night was far from over. What should have been the most beautiful evening of her life was already turning into something ominous, a calm before the storm no one could yet imagine. The silence inside the bridal suite was broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner and the flickering glow of candles. Daniel, eager to begin his life with Anaya, spoke of their future with the optimism of a man in love, while she sat quietly, her mind torn apart by the presence she felt lingering outside the door. Her heart pounded as if it knew what was about to come. When the door finally opened and Richard stepped inside without warning, the fragile balance of the night collapsed in an instant. Daniel stared in disbelief, confusion crossing his face before realization struck him with a crushing force. His father's eyes were not filled with paternal pride, but with an obsession that revealed the truth Anaya had hoped would never surface. The betrayal unfolded in front of him like a cruel performance he could not stop watching. For a few seconds time seemed frozen, then the weight of rage and humiliation consumed him. The confrontation escalated rapidly, voices raised and accusations hurled. Daniel demanded answers, his pride shattered beyond repair. Anaya tried to intervene, her fear rising, but every word only fanned the flames. Richard, instead of denying, declared his feelings openly, his obsession overpowering his judgment. The room turned into a battlefield where love, betrayal, and anger collided violently. In the chaos, Daniel grabbed a wine bottle from the table, his desperation fueling every move. He lashed out, but the struggle turned deadly when the bottle shattered, leaving sharp fragments that gleamed in the candlelight. The fight grew brutal, clumsy, and fueled by raw emotion. In a moment of frenzy, Daniel was struck, the glass piercing deep. He collapsed onto the floor, blood pooling quickly beneath him, his final breaths slipping away before he could even process the horror of what had happened. Anaya froze, her gown stained, her body trembling. Richard tried to calm her, insisting that they were free now, but his words only deepened her terror. The man who had once charmed her now looked monstrous, drenched in blood and desire. Driven by shock and panic, she seized the broken weapon still in her hands and turned it on him. In a swift, desperate motion, she plunged it into his chest. Richard staggered, eyes wide with disbelief, before crumpling beside his son. The room fell silent again, but the silence was no longer peaceful. Two bodies lay lifeless on the floor, and in the middle stood the bride, her wedding night transformed into a nightmare drenched in betrayal, violence, and irreversible loss. Morning arrived with golden sunlight spilling across the resort, but inside the bridal suite the air was thick with death. Hours had passed since the violence, yet Anaya remained frozen, her gown torn and stained, her mind shattered by the weight of what she had done. She had not slept, nor had she moved the bodies that lay sprawled across the room. Her husband's lifeless form lay only feet away from his father's, a chilling reminder of how far things had spiraled out of control. The petals scattered across the bed now looked grotesque against the dark stains that spread across the sheets and floor. When staff knocked on the door the next morning to deliver breakfast, there was no response. At first, they thought the couple was simply resting after the long night of celebrations. But as hours went by, concern grew. Guests whispered in the hallways, wondering why the newlyweds had not appeared. Eventually, the door was opened by hotel management, and what they found sent shockwaves through the resort. The sight of two bloodied bodies, the bride trembling in silence, was more horrifying than anyone could comprehend. Police were called immediately, and the investigation began. Anaya was taken into custody, her hands still shaking, her face pale as stone. News spread quickly, reaching both families and then the media. What had started as an international love story ended as a scandal that made headlines across continents. Every detail of the forbidden affair and the violent deaths was picked apart by reporters, each headline more sensational than the last. For some, Anaya was painted as a victim, seduced by an older man, trapped in a dangerous obsession, and pushed into a nightmarish corner she could not escape. For others, she was cast as a manipulative woman who betrayed her husband and destroyed a family for selfish desires. Richard's past was dragged into the spotlight, his business reputation tarnished, while Daniel was remembered as the son whose trust had cost him his life. The grand wedding that had promised unity and celebration now stood as a haunting cautionary tale. The resort, once decorated with lights and music, was left with memories of screams and bloodstains. What should have been a fairy tale beginning ended in unimaginable tragedy, leaving behind broken families, unanswered questions, and a chilling reminder of how secrets and obsession can turn love into destruction. The story closed not with joy, but with silence, a silence that would echo for years to come.